Hi everybody, welcome back to the update on the coronavirus. Hi everybody, welcome back to the update on the coronavirus. So last week we had a discussion around the questions that I had supporting students who we may be sending home and how we're going to cater for their safeguarding and making sure that they've got their free school meals, because not many people have actually had to think about this yet, although I did see something on Twitter slightly earlier, a suggestion that a head teacher has made around giving them supermarket vouchers so that they can make sure they get that food. Although for all on lockdown, I'm not entirely sure how that's going to happen. Anyway, so we thought we'd have a bit of an update this week. We've got a bit more information coming out. We've got far more cases in the UK, and we have got students in schools now who are presenting with coronavirus symptoms. Part of the advice that's been given to us is using the code Y in registers, and that is being used for students who are self-isolating because of coronavirus concerns, so those students who have been told to self-isolate. It's a little bit ambiguous as to those students who are not coming to school because they are worried about catching coronavirus. So we have some students who are immunosuppressed, we have students with cystic fibrosis, with lung conditions, students with severe asthma, students who, for whatever reason, cannot or do not feel that they should be in a school environment, and schools haven't shut down yet. So it's a question of what are we going to code those as, and we're not being advised to code those as Y at the moment. So it's a little bit ambiguous still as to what we're going to do with that. One piece of advice is that actually when you're analysing attendance is that you look at them as two separate groups. So we look at whole school attendance, and yes, we're going to take a hit, we're definitely going to go below 97%, but actually we look at those students who have self-isolated or isolated deliberately against the rest of our population, and actually you'll probably find that your figures pan out a little bit better if you do that. So you're looking for that, and you're perhaps going to do a bit of a case study around it so that later on in the year, should the big O come and visit you or anything else, you've got that story, that backstory around why your attendance wasn't great. The second thing is to have a look at our advice that's being given to us by various solicitors and lawyers. So there is an educational lawyer, I suppose is the best word for them, called Irwin Mitchell, and they actually sent out an email earlier this week, so we're on Wednesday now, it was sent out on Monday, with some information around things that should be happening in schools. So I'm going to give you a quick summary of the things that were said within that email. Okay, so the first thing they're talking about is who should be self-isolating and what restrictions are in place. And ironically, at the point of writing it, even though North Italy had shut everything down, and then eventually the whole of Italy, they weren't saying that that was an automatic self-isolation. However, that has now changed. So anybody who's coming back from that zone, they are supposed to be putting themselves in self-isolation for 2 weeks before they're coming back into a school environment. And if they're showing symptoms, they should be doing it straight away. What should we do if we suspect a student or member of staff has coronavirus? Can common sense come into play here? Send them home. Come on, we need to be using our logic rather than asking for advice on this one. If we suspect somebody has coronavirus, they've been into contact with somebody from a high-risk area, you've already got cases in the school, just get them home. We can deal with anything else later. If it's a member of staff, are they entitled to pay? Yes, they are. Statutory sick pay or normal school sick pay. Even if that then turns out to not be coronavirus, they are still entitled to their sick pay. The student, mark them as absent, mark them as ill, whatever it is you need to do in there. Of course, on the back of that, we're also getting advice from 111 as to what we need to do with them if they're taken ill whilst they're in school. The third question that's coming up is, can you insist that a student or a member of staff self-isolates? In other words, as a school, can you sit there and go, you must go home and stay at home for 2 weeks? Again, it's playing a little bit to common sense. You have a duty, or the schools have a duty of care to the rest of the students and the rest of the staff who are within that school environment. So if you seriously suspect somebody has the virus, you have to send them home. I don't think there's any question about that. And okay, they might not want to, but you have that responsibility to deal with that issue. Just going back to that idea around pay, the government has said it's actually going to change the law around statutory sick pay so that it is payable from day one rather than day 3. However, if somebody is diagnosed with the virus, you have to pay them from day 1. And I realise I'm not particularly talking to SENCOs here, I'm talking to head teachers and bursars and school business managers, but you'd be surprised what my audience is on this channel. Another question is around cover. So I can give an example of a school that has about 50 members of staff, and I know that today they had to have 7 supply teachers in because of the number of staff that are off sick. And it's, unreasonable that we're going to be able to pull together that many supply staff sometimes. So if within your capacity you can use other staff in the school to cover lessons, it would be reasonable in these circumstances to ask them to do so. You may have to take union advice on it, because I know some schools have negotiated with their unions that they do rarely cover. However, this is a very rare circumstance. It's quite unusual. And the advice from Irwin Mitchell is that yes, you can use your staff within school to cover a different class or do something different under this quite extreme set of circumstances. It's not just our students that might be immunosuppressed or have high vulnerability. We know that the workforce for teachers is getting on in age, getting on in years. So we don't have that many who are over 60, to be fair, but we do know that the older population, certainly from 45 onwards, oh my god, that's me, certainly from 45 onwards, are slightly more vulnerable to the coronavirus. And then, of course, we've got people with long-term health conditions, which generally, again, tend to be in the older population. And when we catch something like a normal cold, it knocks us for 6, as opposed to when we were a bit younger. A school has a duty of care to those members of staff. So if you are aware that there is things going around in the school, just like we have the big poster in school that tells us that if a child comes into school with chickenpox, then we need to inform our pregnant members of staff. Coronavirus is just the same. So if we know we have got staff who are vulnerable and maybe at risk, then we need to be informing them. But actually it goes a little bit wider than that, because what we also know about the virus is that we can have asymptomless carriers. And talking with a few friends and colleagues, one of them was telling me that her mum is about to start undergoing chemotherapy. She's in her 2nd round of chemotherapy. She's concerned that she's out there teaching with students, that she's going to pick something up, not necessarily get it herself, but then pass it on to her mum. So even though we might think we only need to inform those staff with specific needs, maybe it needs to go a bit further than that, because that member of staff might not have shared with everybody that they have a relative who is immunosuppressed or very vulnerable to things. But we need to do that without causing a mass panic. So we can't wander in there and say, yeah, 3 students in school have got coronavirus, and everybody go, whoa, I'm self-isolated for 2 weeks. It's not that, but it's about being sensible and sharing the information with people in a sensible manner. The one that keeps coming up is, do we have to shut a school or college if somebody comes back with a positive diagnosis of coronavirus? And the answer is, I don't know. It depends what Public Health England tells you to do. So in some cases, yes. In some cases, the answer is going to be no. It really will depend. I can imagine that primary schools are more likely to be told to shut down than secondary schools. However, of course, we've got that meeting tomorrow. So tomorrow will be the 12th of March, Thursday, and we have yet another COBRA meeting to discuss whether or not we're going to extend that Easter break and put a week on either side of it in order to have a kind of 4-week lockdown and try and reduce the spread of the virus. I don't think anybody's actually thought that one through, because not the whole of the country has got the same 2 weeks off at Easter. So unless they're going to lock us down for 5 weeks, which would actually cover it, then that would actually work. But they're talking about 1 week either side, and that won't be everybody locked down at the same time. That was just me thinking in the car on the way home, but hey ho. How do we reduce the risk? Get those hands washed. It's pretty much the only thing we can do at the moment, along with our snuffle stations that we talked about last week, and making sure we've got tissues, sneezing into our elbows, all of those kinds of things. And as soon as anybody starts to display any symptoms, even if we think it might turn out to be the common cold, using a bit of common sense and perhaps letting that person go home. Normally in school we say, oh, just get a tissue, you'll be fine, sit in the corner. Actually, at the moment, maybe we need to be a little bit more vigilant and getting them home. And yeah, that is going to cause a childcare issue for parents and everybody else, but it's the reality of where we are at the moment. Something else that Irwin Mitchell kind of picked up on was, can a school stop a member of staff travelling away on holiday? And the answer is no. So if your school turns around to you and says, well, you can't go away on holiday at Easter, yeah, you can. Your holiday is your choice. However, use a bit of common sense. Again, it comes up a lot today. You're going to have to think about the long-term implications, and don't travel to a country that is in lockdown. That would be rather a silly thing to do, and then expect to come back. And if you deliberately travel somewhere, knowing that you're going to have to self-isolate when you come back from it, I would imagine some schools are going to question that and as to whether you can do it. Although I'm pretty sure my husband will correct me in a moment. I suspect your school may suggest that is unpaid. I'm not sure where we would stand on that.
I don't think they'd be able to do anything about it. They'd frown upon it. But if that's what the government had put in place, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it, because you're entitled to your sick pay.
So pretty much the answer is the government needs to shut down flights to countries that are in lockdown. Simple answer. That would actually reduce the problem in the first place. Okay, and where can you find up-to-date information? Well, the government has, and I'm reading this from the screen to make sure I get it right, the COVID-19 Guidance for Educational Settings, which provides information about different things and how to prevent the spread of the virus, and information around travel, especially if your school has booked trips abroad and that kind of thing, and what you do about refunds. We will make sure that the link for that goes in the description box below. That was the Irwin Mitchell, that's the lawyer's advice. The DfE actually have their own helpline and email address and website that you can go to get information around the coronavirus. And again, we'll pop those links either on the screen, probably somewhere above my head, or just over there, even down here, or in the description box below, just so you've got somewhere else to go to get that up-to-date information. Of course, I'm filming this today, and come tomorrow it may well have all changed. The really great news about this, though, is all those companies are coming together to provide support for schools that are affected. And I know of 3 companies who appeared pretty quickly on my timeline on social media that are offering free support and resources. So the first one that kind of popped up was Twinkle. So some people might have a subscription already, but if you haven't, if your school is closed because of the coronavirus, they are offering free, I'm not going to call it a membership, they're offering free access to their materials and resources so that you can support your students from a distance over that period of time. And if you go to their website, there's some information on there about the things that you need to provide to evidence that your school is actually closed. The second company to kind of jump onto that one was Emiel Education, and I'm a great fan of Emiel Education anyway. They offer numeracy and literacy catch-up software, so this can be used from reception through to year 6 in your primary schools, but actually can be used for years 7 and 8, perhaps those weaker students, and that's where my SEN hat comes on. We're going to struggle to support some of our students, so perhaps setting the normal lesson, telling them to get on with it online isn't going to work. Those games provided by Emiel will really help them from a literacy perspective, but also from a numeracy perspective as well. And some people don't realise they have the literacy packages in there as well as the numeracy. And I know I always talk about their numeracy stuff. The third company that came to my attention for this is Learning Ladders, and they too have said any school that is closed because of the coronavirus can talk to them, and they will provide free access to their resources as well for that period of the closure. And all three of those companies have made it absolutely clear that's not just for the UK, they're actually doing it as a worldwide kind of thing. So I'm hoping my audience isn't just the UK, and that some of those schools abroad are able to tap into that support as well. If I hear of any other companies, I'll make sure that they get added into the description below, or perhaps do an update video next week as well. And the final thing I want to say is that the Association for School and College Leaders is actually calling for SATs tests to be suspended and for league tables to be postponed and cancelled for this year as a result of the coronavirus outbreak. So even though we may not close the schools and schools may not be affected, because of everything else that's going on, it's one less thing that we need to actually think about. They're really calling for those things to be scrapped. It isn't quite as simple and straightforward with GCSEs and A-levels, of course, because that affects the child's next phase of education and where they get to go to next. So whether they're going to go from GCSEs to A-levels or T-levels or apprenticeships or jobs, and those who are doing A-levels, whether they're going to get their places at university or onto their next level of course. So it's not as easy as saying, oh, let's just scrap those for this year. There is talk about postponing them. There is talk about possibly using results, so teacher assessment alongside some possible assessments that go with it. But at the moment, that is all up in the air, and there is nobody kind of coming out there and saying, well, this is what is going to happen. And I'm a parent. I have a child who is in year 11, and I'm still pushing him to revise his GCSEs. It's a hard slog and quite a hard push we're having to give, but yeah, I'm still doing it. But at the back of my mind, I'm thinking, what's the impact of this going to be? If he doesn't take the exams, he's going to really resent me for making him revise. And if he does take the exams, what risk are we putting those children at from the virus and for the virus? So as usual, I have more questions than answers, but I think it's nice to kind of get them out there, share them, and perhaps get everybody else thinking about it. And hopefully we're going to get some information tomorrow around what's going to happen next. Thanks for watching, everyone.